reintroduce Lisa Higgins, but you're Lisa Rebel. I love that on your little, on your little name ident. Just to head up, you do have a heavy cold, so we will forgive any coughing or spluttering. But thank you so much for being with us today, Lisa. And again, I think menstruality, it sounds like a word we should know because it sounds so familiar to other words, but a lot of people don't know what that is and what a menstruality coach is. So again, if you could kind of navigate us through that and then talk a little bit about kind of what brought you to this world, that'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm a bit croaky. Sorry about that, everyone. Um, yeah, so menstruality is really tapping into our own wisdom that's already there, really, within our bodies. Like, it sounds like something that's kind of, out of reach, the fact that we haven't really heard about this term. But really, all it is just coming back into our cyclical knowledge and our cyclical wisdom that's all held together within our own menstrual cycles. Um, it is really about learning. So menstruality obviously sounds a bit like spirituality. Um, Really, it's engaging with the psycho-spiritual energetics of the menstrual cycle. And what that really means is looking at the cycle as more than just the biological process that happens, looking at it from a perspective of how much it affects our emotional body and how much it can affect, as Izzy said, like the creative side of things, creative side of life, but also, who you are as a person, what makes you tick, what kind of aspects of life are kind of moving through you, and how you can find some amazing tools for like, looking at your life purpose or optimizing your life, or and it really does touch on everything. So it's not just about, your physical health, it's your emotional health, it's even your spiritual health. Um, and it really is something that I'm so passionate about everybody knowing about their own menstruality and coming into that relationship with their cycles in this way. No matter what your experience currently is, there's something in there for everybody. Um, and for me personally, it was absolutely vital for my healing of PMDD, which I had for quite a long time during my 20s and 30s. So I noticed, like, when I was in my mid 20s, that I was getting PMS that was affecting me more than just sort of, feeling a bit teary or a bit kind of unsettled. This was sort of more um, being unable to stop the tears and feeling so anxious that I felt like I couldn't function on those few days before. It would be really bad, like particularly the day before my cycle, um, to the point where I would kind of get these sort of intrusive suicidal thoughts as well. And at the time, I went to the doctors. I was probably about 25 at the time, and the I guess, well, that was like 15 years ago. So the kind of approach then was really, nobody even knew about PMDD. It wasn't even a term that was used at the doctors. They, I think they just wrote it down as premenstrual anxiety or anxiety before period. And then I went on to take antidepressants from that time, and that was really useful for me. And it's something that I'm always say that I'm not anti-medication, because I think that these things can really help with, in combination with everything. But the thing that always stuck with me was that there was never any forward plan. It was very much kind of like, deal with the symptom, come back in 3 months. And even at that time, I was like, well, if this is something that's part of my menstrual cycle, and I kind of had the view that my cycle was sort of broken and something was going wrong with it for me to feel so bad, then what, like, that's a hell of a long time before I would reach menopause to be on medication. And if that's the kind of, if that was their approach and that solution was there, then fine. But it was the fact that there was never really an actual conversation about that. There was never really a forward, um, just no engagement of that fact that it would be quite a long time. It was just kind of like, oh, well, if it's working now, just, keep coming back for your reviews and that kind of thing. So I just journeyed on with that, and felt a lot better. And then fast forward to about sort of 5, 6 years, and oh no, longer than that, actually, about 8 years. I um, decided to come off them, as I was really interested in sitting with plant medicine. And to have ayahuasca, you need to be off everything, especially SSRIs, because they can be really um, counterproductive and actually be quite like seriously not a good combo. So anyway, I kind of bit the bullet and thought, I'll see how the land lies now. Do I even have that? Like, it was a long time ago. Um, and to cut a long story short, I kind of ended up then at the same time moving across the world and had a big life change. And my symptoms came back really strong. Um, and I remember, being in this, I'd moved to Indonesia, I had this beautiful house with a swimming pool. We were living this like incredible life through my husband's work. And I just remember looking at this swimming pool and thinking, like, having these flash intrusive thoughts that I should just drown myself. And it was obviously terrifying at the time. And I didn't want to just, well, I was in a bit of a tricky position because of where I was. Mental health is not something that's very, it's just not the same thing in Indonesia as it is over here. So even just finding any resources was difficult. I didn't want to just also go back onto medication if there was another way. So at the same time, I started looking around and I started looking at PMDD and what even was this and what's the sort of current, what's around there now. And that's when I came across the Red School and their book, Wild Power. And I got that book just before we moved and I read it. I remember just sitting there and like devoured the whole thing really quickly. And oh my God, it was like the biggest light bulb moment, I guess, of my life. And it was just what they'd specifically written and referenced these terrifying intrusive thoughts, these suicidal thoughts in the book. And they'd said how women who are high sensitives or who have got have been through some trauma in their life, or there was a few other reasons, could experience their cycle in this way. And it was just the first time that it'd been kind of recognized, that extreme feeling that I was feeling. And actually the whole of that book and the whole of the Red School's approach. And I should add that after I did that, I went on to train with them for a year because I was just like, oh my God, I need to get more of this. And I was also at a bit of a career crossroads and was doing a diploma in counselling, and it kind of all just serendipitously happened where I went onto their training program for a year, which was life-changing and changed my cycle. And as soon as I started to engage with my cycle in this way and learn about this sort of this education and this new way of living, which is turning towards a more cyclical life and changing my lifestyle to suit that, my symptoms just disappeared. And it was just so profound. And it really felt like someone had just sort of reached out and sort of give me a real hand to hold and, sort of like save my life in a lot of ways, because the real crux of it is that it just normalized everything. So what I learned, particularly about that time of my life, is that when you're in this huge period of change, your cycle will be reflecting that. So if you are somebody that is a high sensitive or prone to anxiety, or the way that we actually look at it now in menstruality is that if you're somebody that has those kind of more severe PMS into PMDD territory, we actually see it as a sign of real high intuition and very powerful person. And actually what's going on with that extreme sensitivity and that extreme emotion is in the same way that highly sensitive people are the same. It's actually just a lot of energy and a lot of power in there. And being able to sort of work with myself in that way just gave me validation and understanding and compassion, but it also helped me to I guess understand that those when it was happening so strongly at that time in my life, I'd just gone through this huge life change. So I was, even though I was in this beautiful place and had this really lucky experience, it was quite a lonely experience. My husband was out at work all day. I just literally left like a job, a house, all my family, all my friends, and moved to the other side of the world. And we call it when you're in a void. So when you're in a void space in your life, that is when your symptoms can kind of really ramp up a bit. So I always kind of say that with clients that, whatever's going on in their life, and usually when people come to me, they are in a bit of a turbulent place in their life as well. Um, and yeah, again, it's sort of like working with that and seeing how this actually, your cycle really is just communicating to you about this, and seeing your cycle as an ally and as this kind of guide within you that's sort of giving you that communication is, it's just life changing, because it's like not against you and it's not something that's broken. And actually I've kind of realized that actually through that sensitivity it sort of brought me to this work. And I do believe, and every client that I do see that comes to me and says they have severe PMS or PMDD, and they just feel completely lost and like they're losing grip on their whole lives, and all of that, it usually, like within a few sessions, I can see that they also have this high sensitivity and this high intuition, and they're actually usually really creative people, really empathic people. And sometimes it's not even your own sensitivity that you're holding. It could be like the environment that you're in at the minute or what you're absorbing around you that's sort of ramping up those symptoms. And again, it sort of just gives you that context so that you're not fighting yourself anymore and you're not kind of scared of what's happening. You're kind of like, right, okay, this is happening. How do I need to change my life now to suit this? And by engaging with menstruality, this sort of magical process happens where things do dissipate and you kind of become more empowered, more able to read your body, able to sort of read what's happening, put like boundaries in place. And it just makes that whole premenstrual time just way easier to deal with.
So I'm kind of thinking of people that are suffering with PMDD at the moment and perhaps haven't found the support they wanted or needed from kind of allopathic medicine, so going to the GP, or have found kind of a GP which said, well, this is the symptom you've got, you're obviously depressed, let's put you on antidepressants. But as you said, that's tackling the symptom and not the kind of the root cause of it. So if they came to you, what does menstruality coaching actually entail? It's what practically, like what does that
Mm.
look like?
So usually how I would work with people is to take them on this kind of journey of relearning who they are through their menstruality. So um, in the same way that that's what happened with me and with my Red School training, there's certain aspects in education that we need to sort of know, first of all, like the foundations. So for example, people would come and then I put them on this sort of course that we have. And then the course is sort of material that they will read or listen to or watch in their own time. And there'll be an exercise that will really sort of help them to engage with the work, usually something like a guided meditation or a journaling thing or something else that kind of helps them to really deepen into it. And then we meet on one to one, and that's where I will analyze what's been going on for them in their cycle and how their cycle's been showing up for them in the time between the sessions. And then we will go deeper onto the work and kind of take them through how that actually relates to them and their individual situation. And what tends to happen is that whether it's someone that we're working with over, sort of 12 weeks, or some people do it monthly because it kind of then gives them the chance to see how it plays out in their cycle that next month. Um, it just becomes this sort of process of relearning what's going on and having context to that, and then also applying it into your life. So it can be very, very practical with planning your life and putting in boundaries and seeing how, what sort of lifestyle tweaks that you need to be making to sort of change what's going to happen in the next month and prepare yourself for that period of time. No pun intended. Um, but it also really goes into this deeper story of who we are and who we are as women and what our experiences have been like. For example, the second sessions together, we always go back to people's first bleed. Um, and we kind of spend some time in that space thinking about who were you at that point of time? What was life like for you when you first had your first period? Because a lot of the time, for most of us, it was either a traumatic event or a non-event and was just sort of hushed over. And really that starting point has really had an imprint on how we relate to our cycles. And we kind of go back and kind of um, I guess, reaffirm our wisdom that was there actually at that time and give ourselves the holding that we should have really had. Um, and then there's things like there's 3 menstrual maps, for example, that we teach, and then we look at like how to deal with our inner critics when they show up in the premenstrual time. So yeah, it's a lot of working with the psychology and the psycho spiritual energetics.
I think it's absolutely fascinating, and something that you kind of, again, when you're talking there, you kind of tweaked in my brain. It's like a lot of people, and we've all discussed this today, like kind of the period, your period is your enemy, your menstrual cycle is your enemy, without actually thinking, but my period is me. So you're fighting yourself, and there's this kind of dynamic where you're actually fighting yourself by thinking your period is something other, something outside of who you are. But actually, no, it's intrinsic to who we all are as women and people who menstruate. And I think that's a really interesting, once you kind of get your head around that and go, well, why am I fighting myself? Let's kind of deep dive into that. I think it can lead you on all kind of interesting paths of kind of self-discovery, and as we've been talking about, kind of like harnessing the energy of our kind of cyclical nature. Again, kind of harking back to talking about kind of our route as women kind of through the last century and into this century, and feminism, and kind of the world we operate in the West is very linear, as in like you get to this point and this point and this point and this point, it's all forward, forward, forward. However, we are not linear beings. And to kind of appreciate that and to acknowledge that and to work with that is really quite important. Um, and I think it's absolutely wonderful that there is people who are, I've met with women who are absolutely exasperated with PMDD because it affects every part of your life.
Mm.
And the fact that there is potentially a way that you can work with your PMDD and befriend it, and therefore kind of almost release it in a way it feels like is such a powerful thing. Um, Thank you, Lisa. I really, really appreciate your time and your candidness about your experiences, and the path that you've all been on. Has it been quite extraordinary, but extraordinary in a way that we all experience it. Do you know what I mean? It's not kind of it's like you've kind of all have kind of gone, right, I need to do something about this, and this is the path you've gone on. But your knowledge and wisdom is beneficial to everyone who's watching this.